The Silent Guardians. Admiral Zextrol watched as the last Concorde battleship shattered into fragments against the void of space. From the observation deck of Haven Station, the battle looked almost beautiful, silent bursts of light, delicate arcs of debris spinning outward. The reality was far from beautiful. Each flash meant thousands of lives extinguished. Each broken ship brought the Voidborn one step closer to total conquest. "It's over," whispered Science Director Nella, her 4 eyes blinking rapidly in distress. The pale blue membrane across her face pulsed with anxiety. "The Fifth Fleet was our last organized defense." Zextrol's scaled skin darkened with emotion. "The Concorde stood for 12,000 years. How could we fall in mere months?" The answer hung unspoken between them. Nobody had been prepared for the Voidborn, creatures that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in some other dimension. Their ships absorbed energy weapons, regenerated hull damage, and possessed weapons that bypassed the strongest shields as if they weren't there. Haven Station had become exactly what its name suggested: the last refuge for survivors from dozens of species across the galaxy. Once a thriving trade hub, it now housed the desperate remnants of fallen civilizations. Located in an isolated asteroid belt orbiting a dying star, it remained hidden only because it was too insignificant for the Voidborn to bother with. "For now, Admiral, we're receiving a priority message from engineering," announced a young Carillion officer, his voice cracking with exhaustion. Zextrol followed him to the communications center, where Chief Engineer Grekval hunched over a console. The diminutive Vulcan barely reached Zextrol's waist, but his technical brilliance had kept Haven Station functioning well beyond its intended capacity. "I found something," Grekval said without preamble. "A signal pattern I've been tracking for weeks. It's artificial, definitely not Voidborn." "Another survivor group?" Nella asked, hope flickering in her voice. Grekval shook his head. "No. It's coming from the restricted zone in Sector 87B. A heavy silence fell over the room. Sector 87B had been quarantined by Concorde decree for over 4 centuries. It contained a single G-class star with 9 planets, the third of which had developed primitive intelligent life. The species there had been deemed too aggressive and unstable for contact. The official Concorde assessment had classified them as likely to self-terminate before achieving interstellar capability. "That's impossible," Zextrol finally said. "The natives of that system were pre-industrial when last surveyed. They couldn't possibly be generating signals we could detect from this distance." Grekval's expression remained serious. "The signal isn't random, Admiral. It's a navigational beacon, and it's using mathematical sequences that suggest deliberate contact attempts." "Show me," Zextrol demanded. The screen displayed a series of pulses, structured and precise. As Zextrol watched, the pattern completed a cycle, then repeated, each time with a slight variation that couldn't be coincidental. "They're counting prime numbers," Nella whispered, then shifting to geometric sequences. "This is a first contact protocol." "It can't be them," insisted Zextrol. "The natives of that world." "Humans," interrupted Nella. "They call themselves humans. These humans were destroying their own environment and fighting tribal wars when we last observed them. That was barely 4 centuries ago. No species evolves from primitive to spacefaring that quickly." Grekval's face creased with concern. "There's more. The signal contains embedded data packets. I've begun decryption, but they appear to be sensor readings, detailed scans of Voidborn ship movements across multiple sectors." Zextrol's scales flared in surprise. "That's impossible. Our own sensors can barely track Voidborn ships at close range. You're suggesting these humans have technology that surpasses Concorde capabilities." "I'm suggesting," Grekval said carefully, "that we may have catastrophically underestimated them." The command center fell silent again, broken only by the soft beeping of consoles and the constant low hum of life support systems straining to maintain atmosphere for thousands of refugees. "We need to respond," Nella finally said. "If they can track the Voidborn, they might have found weaknesses we haven't discovered. Or it's a trap," countered Security Chief Vantis, a hulking Draveri whose species was known for paranoia as much as for their formidable combat skills. "The Voidborn could have discovered the human world and are using it to lure survivors." Zextrol considered the possibilities. Haven Station had supplies for another 3 months at most. Refugees arrived daily with tales of worlds burning, civilizations crumbling. Without new allies or a miracle, extinction was certain. "Prepare a scout ship," he ordered. "Minimal crew, stealth systems at maximum. We'll send a reply to the coordinates and arrange a meeting point in neutral space." "I should go," Nella said immediately. "First contact protocols are my specialty." "Too risky," Zextrol countered. "We need you here." "With respect, Admiral," she persisted, "if these humans have somehow developed advanced technology in isolation, they may have evolved along completely different lines than Concord species. My xenosociological experience might be the difference between establishing an alliance and causing offense." After further debate, Zextrol reluctantly agreed. The small scout ship Whisper departed Haven Station 12 hours later, carrying Nella, Grekval, a medical officer named Gento, and a security team led by Vantis himself. The Whisper traveled through 3 jump points, each transition leaving them vulnerable to detection. The crew's nerves frayed with each passing hour. They had transmitted their response to the human signal, including coordinates for a meeting in an uninhabited system at the edge of the restricted zone. "Approaching final jump point," announced the pilot, a young Lamarine female whose reflexes were among the fastest of all known species. No sign of pursuit or Voidborn activity. "Proceed," ordered Vantis, his massive hand resting on his disruptor. The ship shuddered as it passed through the quantum boundary of the jump point. Stars blurred, then snapped back into focus as they emerged in the designated system. A red dwarf with a sparse asteroid belt and no planets. "Scan for vessels," Vantis commanded. "Nothing on sensors," the pilot replied. "Wait. Energy spike at bearing 045 Mark 018. The view screen showed empty space, then suddenly a ship appeared. It seemed to coalesce from darkness itself, as if light had been flowing around it, and now chose to reflect off its surface. The design was unlike anything they had seen, sleek and angular, with no visible engine ports or weapon mounts. "By the ancestors," whispered Grekval. "Adaptive light absorption technology. They were already here, watching us arrive." The ship was small, perhaps twice the size of their scout vessel. Its hull was a deep matte black that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. No markings were visible. "We're receiving a transmission," the communications officer reported. "Audio only, translated through our systems." "Play it," Nella said, stepping forward. A voice emerged from the speakers, calm, measured, and distinctly artificial. "Greetings, representatives of the Galactic Concord. We are the Solar Confederation of Earth. Your response to our beacon is acknowledged. Please maintain position. A delegation will board your vessel for initial contact procedures." Vantis bristled. "Board our vessel? Absolutely not. Security protocols." "We don't have the luxury of protocols anymore," Nella interrupted. "Send acceptance." Minutes later, a small shuttle detached from the human vessel and approached the Whisper. It docked with precision, connecting to their airlock without requiring any adjustments. "Atmosphere analysis complete," reported Gento, the medical officer. "They've matched our life support settings exactly. Impressive adaptability." The airlock cycled, and 3 figures entered. They wore form-fitting dark suits that seemed to contain integrated technology, though no weapons were visibly apparent. Their faces were uncovered, revealing a species that walked upright on 2 legs, with bilateral symmetry similar to many Concord races. What struck Nella immediately was how ordinary they appeared. Based on the technological sophistication they had displayed, she had expected beings of obvious advancement. Instead, these humans looked almost disappointingly conventional. The lead human, a female with dark skin and close-cropped hair, stepped forward. "I am Admiral Chen Wei of the Solar Confederation. These are my colleagues, Dr. Elias Okoro, xenobiology specialist, and Commander Satya Rao, first contact liaison." Nella performed the formal greeting gesture of her people. "I am Science Director Nella of the Galactic Concord. We are surprised to find your civilization has advanced to this level." Admiral Chen's expression remained neutral. "We are aware the Concord has been observing Earth for centuries. Your quarantine beacons were detected approximately 200 years ago, though we chose to respect the boundaries while developing our technologies." 200 years. Grekval sputtered. "That's impossible. The technological leap would be—" "Necessity drives innovation," interrupted Dr. Okoro, his voice deep and resonant. "When you believe you're alone in a hostile universe, you develop differently than species with the luxury of gradual advancement." Commander Rao, a slender woman with striking amber eyes, spoke next. "We've been tracking the Voidborn invasion since it began. We detected the quantum disturbance when they entered this galaxy 18 months ago." "You know what they are?" Nella asked eagerly. "Not entirely," Admiral Chen admitted. "But we know they can be fought. And we know they can be killed." Hope, dangerous, fragile hope, bloomed in Nella's chest for the first time since the invasion began. "How?" "Our strongest weapons barely affect them. The Voidborn exist partially in fold space," Dr. Okoro explained. "Conventional weapons strike only their physical manifestation. We've developed technology that can target both aspects simultaneously." "If you have such weapons," Vantis growled suspiciously, "why haven't you used them? Why hide and watch as the galaxy burns?" Admiral Chen's eyes hardened. "Earth remains undetected by the Voidborn. We've been gathering information, analyzing their patterns, and preparing our response. A premature engagement would reveal our existence before we're ready to launch a full-scale counteroffensive. We've also been cautious about revealing ourselves to the Concord," added Commander Rao. "Your civilization's assessment of humanity was not flattering. We needed to be certain we wouldn't simply be trading one threat for another." Nella felt a flush of shame. The Concord's arrogance had cost them dearly. They had dismissed an entire species as primitive and dangerous, never bothering to check if their assessment remained accurate. "The Concord is gone," she said softly. "What remains are refugees and survivors. We have no authority to offer except desperation." Admiral Chen nodded slowly. "Then perhaps it's time for a new beginning. The Solar Confederation is prepared to offer sanctuary to your refugees and to share our defensive technology." "In exchange for what?" Vantis demanded. "Information," replied Chen simply. "Everything you know about the galaxy, star charts, species data, cultural archives, and volunteers for joint military operations." "You're planning to fight back," Zextrol said, realization dawning. "Not just defend. You want to drive the Voidborn out." "Humanity doesn't surrender territory easily," Admiral Chen stated with quiet intensity. "We've spent 2 centuries preparing for threats from beyond our system. Now that threat has arrived, and we don't intend to hide while the galaxy falls." As the humans outlined their proposal, Nella felt a growing sense of wonder. This species, isolated and developing in secret, had created technologies along completely different paths than the Concord. Where Concord science had focused on harmony and efficiency, human innovation had been driven by survival and competition. The result was a civilization uniquely positioned to face the Voidborn, a species the humans had never met but had been preparing to fight for generations. When the meeting concluded and preliminary agreements were made, Nella remained behind with Admiral Chen, while the others returned to their respective ships. "There's something I don't understand," Nella admitted. "If you detected our quarantine beacons 2 centuries ago, you must have realized you weren't alone in the universe. Why continue developing as if you were isolated?" Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. Humanity has a complicated relationship with the unknown. Throughout our history, we've both feared and longed for contact with other intelligent life. When we found your beacons and decoded enough to understand we were being deliberately avoided, it affected our collective psyche profoundly. So you built weapons, Nella said, unable to keep disappointment from her voice. No, Chen corrected. We built shields first, then ships that could travel undetected. Weapons came later, when our deep space sensors detected the quantum anomalies that preceded the Voidborn. We didn't know what was coming, but we knew something was. Chen gestured toward the viewport, where the stars seemed cold and distant. Humanity learned long ago that the universe doesn't reward complacency. The Concorde grew comfortable in its dominance and fell in months. We've never had that luxury. As Nella prepared to return to her crew, Admiral Chen offered one final thought. Your people called us aggressive and unstable. Perhaps we are, by your standards. But the galaxy needs those qualities now more than it needs harmony and predictability. Nella couldn't argue with that truth. As the Whisper disengaged and prepared to return to Haven Station, with news of their unexpected allies, she watched the human vessel shimmer and vanish once more into the darkness. Children of Earth. Haven Station transformed in the weeks following first contact. Where once despair hung in the recycled air, now purpose and cautious hope circulated through the corridors. Human engineers arrived in stealth vessels, bringing technologies that the station's refugees had never imagined. Quantum communication arrays that couldn't be intercepted, shield generators that adapted to enemy weapons, and most importantly, the means to finally fight back against the Voidborn. Admiral Zextrol stood on the newly reinforced command deck, watching as 3 human warships decloaked in perfect formation outside the viewport. Unlike the sleek scout vessels they had first encountered, these ships were behemoths, angular leviathans of dark metal, with visible weapon ports and engine arrays that pulsed with controlled energy. The Thermopylae, the Masada, and the Alamo, announced Captain Kira Yamamoto, the human liaison assigned to Haven, each named after a famous last stand in Earth's history. Last stands that were defeats, questioned Zextrol, his translator picking up the historical reference from the human database they had been provided. Captain Yamamoto's lips curved into a slight smile. Tactical defeats, perhaps, but strategic and symbolic victories. Humans remember those who stand against impossible odds, even in failure. A strange outlook, Zextrol commented. The Concorde celebrated successes, not noble failures. And yet here we are, Yamamoto replied simply. The human fleet had grown to over 30 vessels stationed throughout the sector, all implementing the same revolutionary stealth technology that bent light and sensor readings around their hulls. Each ship carried what the humans called phase shift weaponry, systems designed to target the Voidborn in both conventional space and the dimensional folds where they partially existed. The joint operation is ready to proceed, reported Security Chief Vantis, approaching with a data tablet. The massive Draveri had initially been the most skeptical of their human allies, but seeing their technology in action had converted his suspicion to grudging respect. Strike teams are assembled. The plan was audacious. A coordinated attack on a Voidborn supply depot that human scouts had identified in a nearby system. It would be the first offensive action against the invaders since the fall of the Concorde's 5th Fleet. What's the composition of the teams? Asked Zextrol. 3 human operators paired with 2 specialists from our side on each vessel, Vantis replied. I selected volunteers with combat experience. And the command structure? Joint authority, Captain Yamamoto interjected. This is a collaborative mission, Admiral. We fight together or not at all. The operation launched 12 hours later. 5 vessels, 3 human, 2 retrofitted Concorde scouts, jumped into position around the Voidborn depot. The alien structure hung in space like a grotesque sculpture, all twisted spires and pulsating organic-looking components melded with crystalline technology. Aboard the lead human vessel, the Shackleton, Science Director Nella monitored sensor readings with growing amazement. The Voidborn facility had no apparent defenses, no shields, no weapon emplacements, no patrol ships. They never needed them, explained Commander Julian Econ, the human mission leader. No one has ever successfully attacked a Voidborn installation before. They have no concept of vulnerability. That changes today, Nella said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. The boarding teams deployed in specialized pods that matched the quantum signature of the Voidborn structure, allowing them to pass through the outer membrane without detection. Each team carried phase shift charges to place at key structural points identified by human analysis of the facility's energy patterns. Nella watched through the helmet cameras as the mixed teams infiltrated the nightmare landscape of the Voidborn depot. The interior defied conventional architecture. Spaces seemed to fold back on themselves. Corridors stretched and contracted without warning, and gravity shifted unpredictably. "They're rewriting local physics," whispered Grekval from his station beside her. "The structure exists partially in higher dimensions." The Voidborn themselves appeared only as flickering shadows at first, tall, elongated shapes that seemed to glide through walls and floors. The team's specialized visors adjusted, revealing the true horror of the invaders. Beams of semi-transparent tissue stretched over impossible geometries, with multiple limbs that appeared and disappeared as they shifted between dimensions. "Hold positions," Commander Econ ordered calmly as a pair of Voidborn drifted toward one team. "Remember your training. They perceive differently than we do." The human and alien operatives froze, activating the quantum camouflage built into their suits. The Voidborn paused, their features, if they could be called that, rippling in what might have been confusion before they continued past. "They detect dimensional disturbances more than physical presence," Econ explained to the watching command team. "Standard movement creates ripples they can sense. The suit tech dampens those ripples." Team by team, the charges were placed throughout the facility. When the final team reported completion, the Shackleton moved into position for extraction. The boarding pods reconnected with perfect precision, and within minutes, all teams were safely aboard. "Detonation in 30 seconds, announced the weapons officer. "All vessels at safe distance." When the charges activated, the effect was unlike any explosion Nella had witnessed. The Voidborn structure didn't shatter or burn, it collapsed. The dimensional folds that gave it its impossible architecture suddenly unraveled, causing the entire facility to implode into itself. A brief flash of light across multiple wavelengths marked its passing, and then nothing remained but scattered particles. "First blow struck," Commander Econ stated quietly. "Now we see how they respond." The Voidborn response came swifter, and with greater fury than anyone had anticipated. Within days, attacks intensified across multiple sectors. It was as if a slumbering predator had been stung and was now fully awake and in rage. Yet the pattern of attacks revealed something crucial. The Voidborn were searching. They had no idea who had struck them or from where. "They're used to being the hunters," Admiral Chen explained during an emergency council meeting at Haven Station. "For the first time, they're experiencing what it means to be hunted." The gathered representatives of a dozen surviving species listened with a mixture of fear and fascination as human strategists outlined what they had learned from the Voidborn response. "They communicate through quantum entanglement," explained Dr. Elias Okoro, projecting a complex diagram. "But that communication isn't instantaneous across galactic distances as we once thought. There's a delay, a vulnerability we can exploit." Over the following weeks, hit-and-run operations continued. Small teams struck Voidborn outposts, then vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Each success bolstered the coalition's confidence, but Zex Troll remained troubled. "We're winning battles," he confided to Nella, "but the Voidborn still control most of the galaxy. These strikes are barely pinpricks to them." "The humans have a larger strategy," Nella assured him. "They call it death by 1,000 cuts. Each operation reveals more about Voidborn capabilities and weaknesses. And costs lives," Zex Troll countered, his scales darkening with emotion. "We've lost 17 operatives already. Casualties were expected," came a voice from behind them. Admiral Chen had entered the observation deck silently. Every volunteer knew the risks. "How can your people accept such losses so calmly?" Zextral demanded. "The Concorde preserved life above all else. And now the Concorde is dust." Chen replied without rancor. "Humanity's history is written in blood, Admiral. Not because we value life less, but because we understand that survival sometimes requires sacrifice." Before Zextral could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. A tactical officer's voice came over the comm system. "Multiple Voidborn signatures detected. They'd found us." The command center erupted into controlled chaos as officers rushed to battle stations. On the main view screen, spatial distortions heralded the arrival of 3 Voidborn cruisers, massive twisted shapes that seemed to tear through the fabric of space itself. "Stealth systems compromised," reported a technician. "They've adapted to our shield frequency." "Evacuation protocols," ordered Zextral immediately. "Get the civilians to the escape vessels." Admiral Chen was already at a communications terminal, issuing rapid commands. "All Earth vessels converge on Haven. Implement Ragnarok protocol." "What is Ragnarok?" Nella asked, the unfamiliar term not translating. "In human mythology, the final battle at the end of the world," Chen answered grimly, "and our last resort strategy for this exact scenario." The station shuddered as the first Voidborn weapons struck its outer shields. The newly installed human technology held, but warning indicators showed the strain. "We can't win a direct engagement against 3 cruisers," Vantis warned. "Even with the upgraded defenses." "We don't need to win," Chen replied. "We just need to hold until our fleet arrives." The minutes stretched into an agonizing hour as Haven Station absorbed punishment from the Voidborn attackers. Shield generators overloaded and were rerouted. Hull breaches were sealed by emergency systems. Through it all, evacuation ships streamed from the lower docks, carrying thousands of refugees toward prearranged sanctuary coordinates. Just as the main shield generator failed, sensors detected new arrivals. The human fleet had come, not 30 ships, but hundreds. They emerged from stealth simultaneously, surrounding the Voidborn cruisers in a perfect sphere of attack positions. "My God," whispered Grekval. "How many ships have they been hiding?" "Enough," Chen said simply. What followed was not a battle but an execution. The human vessels fired in perfect synchronization, their phase-shift weapons striking the Voidborn cruisers from every angle. The dimensional barriers that had made the invaders nearly invulnerable flickered and failed under the concentrated assault. Within minutes, the threat was neutralized. The Voidborn cruisers collapsed in on themselves, just as the depot had done weeks earlier. In the aftermath, as damage control teams worked to stabilize Haven Station, Admiral Chen revealed the full scope of humanity's preparations. Earth detected the quantum disturbances that heralded the Voidborn nearly 50 years ago. She explained to the gathered coalition leaders, "We've been preparing ever since." Holographic displays showed the true extent of human military might, shipyards hidden in gas giants, bases concealed beneath the surfaces of uninhabited moons, and fleets stationed in dimensional pockets that existed adjacent to normal space. "Why reveal yourselves now?" asked an Etherean representative, their translucent skin pulsing with confusion. "You could have remained hidden, protected your own world." "We could have," agreed Commander Rao, who stood beside Chen. "But isolation is a temporary solution at best. The Voidborn would have found Earth eventually." "More than that," added Dr. Okoro, "we recognized a fundamental truth. No species survives alone. Diversity, biological, cultural, technological, creates resilience. The coalition we're building isn't just a military alliance. It's the next stage of galactic evolution." The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't emerged as conquerors or saviors, but as pragmatic partners who understood that shared survival required shared struggle. 3 days later, the Coalition War Council convened to plan what would become known as the Liberation Campaign. Intelligence gathered from captured Voidborn technology had revealed the location of their central command structure, a massive installation at the galactic core that served as both headquarters and gateway for their invasion forces. "The plan is straightforward," explained General Zhao, the human military commander who had joined the council. "A direct assault on their command node while simultaneous strikes target their major outposts. We sever the head and cripple the body in one coordinated attack. The casualties will be enormous," Zextrol pointed out. "Even with your technology, many ships won't return." "True," Zhao acknowledged without hesitation. "But the alternative is extinction. Not just for your species or mine, but for all sentient life in this galaxy." The debate raged for hours, but in the end, the decision was unanimous. The assault would proceed. The final battle unfolded over 3 days of brutal combat. Human vessels led the charge, their phase-shift weapons creating openings that Coalition ships exploited with devastating effect. The Voidborn fought with increasing desperation as their carefully constructed network of outposts and supply lines collapsed. Aboard the flagship Thermopylae, Admiral Chen directed the final push toward the command node. The massive structure pulsed with eldritch energy as the Coalition fleet approached, dimensional weapons ready. "Something's wrong," Nella warned, studying the sensor readings from her station. "The energy signature is increasing exponentially." "They're initiating a dimensional collapse," Dr. Okoro confirmed, his voice tight with tension. "If that gateway destabilizes, it could create a singularity that would consume half the galaxy." Admiral Chen's expression hardened. "Withdraw all Coalition vessels to minimum safe distance. Human ships will continue the approach." "That's suicide," protested Zextrol. "Even your phase-shift technology can't survive a dimensional collapse." "No," Chen agreed. "But we've prepared for this contingency. The Thermopylae carries a dimensional anchor, a device designed to stabilize the collapse and redirect its energy back through the gateway." Understanding dawned on Nella's face. "You're going to seal their way into our galaxy." "At a cost," Chen said quietly. "The anchor must be precisely positioned within the command structure. The Thermopylae will deliver it." "A suicide mission," Zextrol said, his voice hollow. "A necessary sacrifice," Chen corrected. "One ship for billions of lives." As the Coalition fleet withdrew to safety, the Thermopylae accelerated toward the Voidborn command node. The massive human warship absorbed punishing fire from the remaining defense systems, its shields failing section by section as it closed the distance. In the final moments before impact, Admiral Chen opened a channel to all Coalition vessels. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. "Remember what happens here," she said, "not as a tragedy, but as a choice freely made. Humanity stands with the galaxy today and always. Earth abides." The Thermopylae collided with the command node at relativistic speed. For an instant, the structure seemed to hold. Then both ship and station vanished in a blinding flash of light that transcended the visible spectrum. A shockwave of dimensional energy rippled outward, then collapsed back in on itself, leaving nothing but empty space where the gateway had been. Across the galaxy, Voidborn vessels and structures simultaneously lost cohesion. Without the command node to maintain their dimensional stability, the invaders simply ceased to exist in conventional space. The war ended not with a protracted campaign of liberation, but with a single devastating strike and an act of supreme sacrifice. In the months that followed, the galaxy began the long process of rebuilding. Earth opened its borders fully, sharing technologies and resources with the Coalition species. Haven Station became Haven Prime, the first truly integrated settlement where humans and former Concord species lived and worked together as equals. A memorial service was held for Admiral Chen and the crew of the Thermopylae. Representatives from every Coalition species attended, each bringing rituals and remembrances from their own cultures. Zextrol found himself standing beside Commander Rayo as the ceremony concluded. "I still don't understand," he admitted. How did humanity develop so differently from every other species we've encountered? The Concord achieved technological advancement through cooperation and consensus. Your people did it through conflict and competition. Rao considered the question carefully before responding. Perhaps it's because Earth was never a gentle cradle. Our planet tested us with predators, diseases, natural disasters, and resource scarcity. We competed not just against each other, but against extinction itself. And yet you developed compassion alongside your weapons, Nella observed, joining them. That's the true paradox of humanity. Not a paradox, Rao corrected with a small smile. A necessity. Without empathy, our competitive nature would have destroyed us long ago. Without our drive to overcome challenges, our empathy would have left us vulnerable to a hostile universe. As the gathering dispersed, a group of children played nearby, human youngsters alongside the offspring of a dozen different species, laughing and running without concern for biological differences. They had never known a galaxy at peace until now. The children of Earth, Nella remarked, watching them. Not just the human ones, but all of them, born into a galaxy shaped by humanity's emergence, and hopefully a better one for it, added Zextral. Commander Rao watched the children thoughtfully. We have a saying on Earth. The true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. Admiral Chen and her crew never saw this moment, but they knew it would come. Above them, the stars shone with renewed promise. The Voidborn were gone, and in their place, a new coalition was rising, forged in battle but dedicated to peace. At its heart stood humanity, no longer hidden, no longer alone, but finally taking their place among the galactic community they had helped to save. In the end, it wasn't superior technology or tactics that had turned the tide of war. It was the uniquely human capacity to face annihilation without surrendering hope, to stare into the void and refuse to blink. The galaxy had been broken, then remade. And though challenges would surely come again, they would be met not by separate species struggling alone, but by a unified coalition that had learned humanity's most important lesson. Together, we endure.